Hello everybody, my name is Boulevard, and this is the return of Tournament Tactician. Now, I didn't have one last week because I was having a mental breakdown. Unrelated to Legends of Runeterra. But I finished having it, and now I'm all better, and I can get into bringing you guys some more action. Now, obviously, this one's coming out very late. A couple reasons for that. Number one being that I was casting Fight Night Europe for most of the day. And then after that, I went out to eat, and then I heard about this eggs deck, and I didn't want you guys to go into this blind and run into this, so I researched it as much as I could and put it on the tier list, and we'll get into the eggs deck a little bit later on because I'm sure that some of you have heard of this. Maybe you don't know all the intricacies of it, and I'll be sure to go over it because there are a few things on here because obviously I was away last week, so I missed a few things. The Sivir dominance that has started to take over Runeterra is at the forefront of everybody's mind, so we're going to be going over that, so let's jump into the tier list. So I wanted to zoom in the tier list a little bit more because it's getting long. I should probably delete some decks off of it, but I honestly feel like all of these decks can win a tournament, which is, again, I want to reiterate at the very start of this, these decks are on the tier list because they can win a tournament. You could very well see these in a tournament lineup. Like, even if I put them in tier 3, they could still do it. Now, there's no Viego on the tier list, and the main reason for that is I really don't like, I am not sold on this Thresh Nasus deck that takes out the Thresh and the Nasus and puts Viego in. I've seen people say they have success with it. I really haven't seen it with my own eyes. We watched it in EU Fight Night. It had a pretty poor performance. I've been watching it a little bit on streams and on ladder, and I just really haven't been impressed by this deck. So I kept Nasus on there, but, you know, if you really want to play the Viego deck, that's the most consistent version that I've seen anybody play thus far, is basically just take the Thresh Nasus, take out the Thresh and the Nasus, put in Viego and, like, Vengeances or something along those lines, and that'll probably do it for you. But ultimately, I am not sold on Viego week 1. I feel like we're going to find a Viego Demacia deck a little bit later on, which is weird because I haven't really seen anybody try out that Matron Cythria that we all thought that Viego was going to naturally slot into, but I digress. Let's get into what's actually on the tier list and in tier 1 and all that good stuff. So Thralls is still putting up great numbers. Even in aggro matchups, which is supposed to be the weakness of this deck, it is still finding itself on top more often than not. Really didn't get anything from the new set, but that's fine. A lot of decks didn't get things from the new set, and overall I think that, like, Thralls is still a really solid tier 1 choice. Draven Ezreal along the same vein. TF Swain updated the build a little bit because we did see the TF Swain master himself, Guardia, pick up a second place finish in Fight Night with TF Swain, so we have the updated build from the master himself. Lee Sin Zoe really going more all in on the Eye of the Dragon style of play, really cutting pretty much every other follower. We're not really on the Sparklefly mentor train anymore. Some people have been off of that for a while, but I was still a pretty big believer in the mentor. But now with the way that things have shaped up, with the Sivir dominance in the meta and the Sivir being one of Lee Sin's weaker matchups, I think that Lee Sin players are really just kind of hedging their bets on saying, hey, the IA solo is sort of a good defensive play against those while not sacrificing anything in other matchups. The Lee Sin Akshan is also not on here, mostly because I don't think that it is anywhere near the best Shurima Ionia list. I think that there are 3 Shurima Ionia lists on here, 1 in each tier. And if I'm going to maintain the philosophy that I've had, which is you can only have 1 region combination deck in each tier because one of them has to be better than the other, then Lee Sin Akshan is probably the 4th best Shurima Ionia deck, which means you just shouldn't be playing it. You should be playing any of these other ones, and the Lee Sin can be slotted into Targon very easily. It shouldn't take up one of the best regional combinations in the game for you right now in Shurima Ionia, and you should just play Targon Lee Sin. That just is what it is. But the Lee Sin deck is still phenomenal. It's beating just about everything that isn't the Sivir decks, and there's only one of those, so you can ban it. So I'll get into a lineup a little bit later on what the Lee Sin is going to be slotting into, but I'll talk about the standard later. And then we have Sivir Z/Akshan. So this is something that I'm sure you guys are all familiar with at this point. Ruben Zoo kind of started the innovation ladder on this one. But essentially, it's one of those aggro/combo decks where you've got this game-ending combo where you can throw on the Ghost or the Flurry of Fists and the Twin Disciplines buff paying in really big here onto the Sivir, give it double strike. Ruin Runner, Young Witch really is a nice combo for the Flurry of the Fist as well, giving that the double strike if you've got the Witch onto it. And you can really just kind of pull out a lot of cheeky wins here. The Bakai Reaper I don't like, but honestly, everybody is still just kind of keeping it as one of them, and I couldn't find a solid replacement to show you guys, so I was like, you know, whatever, I'll just kind of keep it in. But this is like the new standard, right? This is probably one of, if not the best decks in the game right now, and I've seen Akshan versions where you basically just take out the Z for Akshan. I don't think they really change too much about the list outside of that. It's really just slot those out. Maybe you put in Resolver. I'm not totally sure, but I've heard that the Akshan version is better, yet everybody brought Zed today, so maybe it's up in the air. Maybe it was a late-stage adaptation, and you should just take out the Zed for the Akshan. This isn't really my style of deck, so I'm not too well-versed on it, but this is something you should absolutely expect to see this weekend. And I think that there's going to be a Sivir deck across most lineups, because there's this, there's Reputation, there's Overwhelm. You can run Overwhelm without Sivir if you're trying to run other Sivir decks, I think that Overwhelm is the one that will function most properly without the Sivir in it at all. But I don't think that's necessarily better than Thralls still, which is why, again, Thralls is the tier 1 deck, the Shurima Freljord list, that's above Overwhelm. So, you know, Overwhelm's kind of figuring out its place in the meta. I expect Overwhelm to fall off a lot this week because of Sivir running rampant elsewhere, as well as Thralls existing as the Shurima Freljord list for now. Then down in tier 2, we've still got discard aggro, we've still got Lurk, updated the Lurk list a little bit, Azir Aurelia, probably the second best Shurima Ionia list in the game right now. I'll get into why Eggs is so low when we get into tier 3, but I do want to mention that, like, Azir Aurelia is still pretty viable. It's still really good. I don't think you should be running it over Sivir Zed. Maybe if you want to, like, you really want to play Azir Aurelia, the only reason I could really see you doing this is either you think people are going to be hard targeting Sivir decks, or you just really wanted to run Reputation. Those are really the only two reasons to be playing Azir Aurelia. Maybe you just really like Azir Aurelia, Darkodius. I don't know if you watch my videos, but if you do, shout out to you for just really liking Azir Aurelia. FTR moved down a peg. I don't think it pairs as well into this Sivir list. You know, Sivir's just super safe. That's the big thing about her, is that she's pretty much immune to combat because she has quick attack, and she's pretty much immune to spells because she has spell shield. And then when she makes your entire board both immune to combat and spells, that's pretty good. So what a lot of the control decks have to look for is easy ways to break the spell shield. So like Ice Shard off of, like a free Ice Shard especially off of a Lissandra is something that you're going to be looking for. Overall, I'm not like in love with Field of Rush's position, but I think that if you are like going the ban Sivir route, then, which I think most people are going to be going this weekend, is just like, you know, ban whatever Sivir deck you see. And then FTR actually pairs pretty well into the rest of the meta. I actually played it in Squeeby's tournament last weekend where I played Thralls, Field of Rush, and Lee Sin because I noticed, I checked the matchup charts and all of them actually had a positive win rate against Draven Ezreal. Draven Ezreal isn't really popular to the point of being exploitable like my lineup was going for, but I still felt really good about the deck choices that I made. I was pretty much just banning every Sivir deck that I saw because, you know, Lee Sin into Sivir, not feeling great. Field of Rush into Sivir, probably going to get outpaced, and then Thralls into Sivir. Once again, you can get outpaced. So pick a ban strategy and you'll build your lineup around that, but I do think that Field of Rush is like still a totally fine choice to bring into the weekend. It's like you can't just look at everything through the Sivir lens when you can just ban it, and the Sivir decks don't really function without Sivir. Like I've seen Reputation play Renekton instead of Sivir to try and diversify it in the lineup. Like you go Sivir Zed and then you go Reputation with like Renekton and LeBlanc, because as long as you are vulnerabling something, Renekton is going to be a 6/5. He is going to meet the Reputation requirement, but the LeBlanc is a must in Reputation. We're actually just going to take a look at the Reputation deck. Because I had mentioned on Twitter pretty shortly after the set dropped that I was really sure that there was going to be an Incisive Tactician LeBlanc loop deck out there, and I was a little worried that it was just going to be Frostbite midrange. That was just going to be another thing that you throw in the deck, and like, it, you know, it's fun, it's Frostbite midrange still, but no, Reputation has really picked itself up, and it was Yang Zera on Twitter that was, you know, kind of memeing, kind of right on the money, saying that you take Sivir, Treasure Seeker, Rockhopper, Merciless Hunter, Ruin Runner, Shaped Stone. You take those cards, you fill the deck with anything else, you have a competitively viable deck. And that's really what Reputation is. Of course, it's not like the rest of the deck is bad. Of course, Thrashing Snapper really pairs well with the Vulnerable. It goes up to the 5 attack because that counts as challenging or blocking or whatever you want to call it, whatever you need it to be for the Thrashing Snapper to get you into that Reputation. And ultimately, you're just looking to like get that Incisive Tactician LeBlanc loop going where you deal with 15 damage. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to explain it. Getting the buff to a 5/5 was really impactful here. So you Incisive Tactician, you rally, you attack. The leveled LeBlanc is going to grab you the Mirror Image. You Mirror Image the Incisive Tactician. And if you have enough damage on board, that's only going to cost you 1 mana or maybe even 0 mana. And you basically just do that until you have to stop. And if your opponent manages to withstand that, the chances of them clearing your board and killing you are pretty low. But once again, there's a lot of cheeky combos out there right now with Ghosts and stuff like that. So you can't just die out of nowhere. We are very much in a one-shot meta right now. Lee Sin one-shots you, Sivir one-shots you, the Egg deck one-shots you, which we'll get into eggs later. And then Shen Jarvan kind of moving down to tier 2. I don't really expect this to have a high presence this weekend. It did get the whale, the pod, which is pretty cool. It will, if you search the slow spell, it'll always get you Golden Aegis, so having that consistent access to the slow spell is really cool. And I think that the pod is really cool overall and did a lot for a lot of decks, but that'll get explored later once Sivir gets knocked down a peg. And I'm really kind of worried about the balance patch coming up for the seasonal. It's it's not for 2 weeks, but so many of these things came up like right before the balance patch needed to get locked in, because they locked these things in 2 weeks early, which means that 2 days ago they locked in whatever the balance patch in a week and a half is going to be, which is something that we all need to keep in mind when we get this balance patch, and it's not what we want it to be. But Sivir was showing a pretty high presence before that. I'm sure that in testing, like, Sivir Akshan and Sivir Zed were really doing pretty well, and like, because Ruben was the one that came out and showed us all Sivir Zed, I'm pretty sure that he's had his eyes on it, and hopefully we'll get that, like, taken down a peg. I definitely don't want the deck to die. I feel like it's just, like, a touch too strong. It's not really something that I think is, like, worth complaining about, but, like, there's always going to be a best deck, and I think right now it's Sivir Zed, and, like, maybe it is just a little bit stronger than everything else, but we'll see how that actually goes. Let's talk about Tier 3, and more importantly, Eggs. Boulevard. Why is this called Eggs? Because there's a Magic deck that does a similar thing called Eggs. That's it. So you might be looking at this list and saying, wow, what is this? So let's go over it. What you are essentially looking to do, and usually this is comboing off by about turn 6 or 7, and it's a good deck, it's a consistent deck. The reason that I have it in Tier 3 is because, like its MTG equivalent, the combo takes time. And because this is a tournament-specific tier list, you are playing timed rounds, especially now with the new Best of 3 Friend Challenge option. There is an internal timer that you are going to have to play around if you are playing this Eggs deck. So what we're looking to do, we get out Akshan, we level Akshan, we get the Warlord's Horde. The Warlord's Horde gives us the Sentinel's Horde, and the one that we are going to pick is Fount of Power, which is going to draw us 2, and our cards cost 1 less this round. So what we want to do is Promising Future the Warlord's Horde. And that's going to give us 2 Sentinel Swords, and that's going to give us 2 copies of Fount of Power. What we are essentially going to do from there is, because all of our cards cost 2 less for the turn, and we have drawn 4 cards, what we are going to do is essentially continuously loop Akshan, get more Warlord's Hordes, get more Sentinel Swords into Fount of Powers, or whatever else that we need to be doing, and that's where Zillion comes in. And all of these, you know, bounce effects, and because it's a cloud effect, for those of you that don't know what a cloud effect is, it's basically an effect that persists until end of turn, for our cards to cost 1 less, in this case 2 less because we played 2 Founts of Power. You know, your Navori Conspirators are going to cost 0, your Akshan's going to cost 0, all this stuff is going to cost 0 or 2 or less, and usually, like, you want to get down to the point where, like, if you can, you want to play a third one so that your Solitary Monks are free and your Verkurian Vagabonds are free. And what you're going to do is play a bunch of Zillions, bounce a bunch of Zillions, cycle through your decks, play enough time bombs to clear your opponent's board, and then attack for lethal. Did you follow that? Essentially, you're just going to keep recalling Akshan, keep playing the Horde, keep getting the Fount of Power, you know, reduce your costs down, and that's what you're looking to do. That's the gist of it. There's footage of it that you can look up. I'll probably link some kind of clip in the description so that you can, like, see the deck in action if this is something that you're interested in bringing. The reason that it's in Tier 3 is because it is an Ionia Shurima deck, and it is going to take a while for the combo to play out. When I watched the combo happen, I think it took about 10 or 12 minutes in real time for it to actually happen, because, like, you need to draw through a solid portion of your deck to get these time bombs to wipe the field. Now, there are other variations of the build that I've seen. Some of them aren't running Zillion at all. I'm not really sure what their win condition is. Maybe they're just, like, homecoming and bouncing the board, but essentially all of them are going to function in the same way, that you are just trying to loop through the Warlord's Horde. I've been told it's like an infinite or near infinite combo, but because you can only play each card in Legends of Runeterra 15 times in a turn because of the Cloud Drinker Hush loop that used to exist, you're not going to be able to stall that out forever. Eventually you will have to end your turn, but, you know, with it taking so much real time, as well as I would imagine that not a lot of people are well versed on this deck, I would not recommend bringing it to a tournament, because you are going to end up in the draw bracket probably at least once, and that's really not what you want to be doing when, like, Sivir Zed will probably yield you a similar win rate much faster. Maybe you can throw it in because it's going to eat a ban, because who in their right mind wants to sit there and play against Eggs for 20-25 minutes? So that's a strategy, but this is one that you're going to have to run at your own risk. I definitely would not recommend it, but, you know, not everybody comes into a tournament with the same mindset. Not everybody comes in with the same goals. So if you want to play Eggs, by all means, you need to do it now, because I've heard that this is getting hotfixed. I wasn't able to find confirmation on that, and I was not able to find confirmation in the manner in which it is getting hotfixed. So as far as I'm aware, that was wishful thinking. Now, depending on when this video was recorded versus when it actually gets uploaded, it'll probably only be an hour or two difference because I have to edit it, but, you know, it's possible that in the time from when I recorded this to when it went live, there was a hotfix implemented or announced or something, so I'll try to update the description as soon as I find confirmation, so check back in the morning or a little bit before your tournament to see if this was hotfixed and the deck is now unplayable. That's eggs. Then, as far as the rest of Tier 3, like, there are a lot of things that kind of just get taken down a peg because they don't pair well into the Sivir meta that we find ourselves in. Yetis is actually still pretty good. Frostbite Foundry, I was optimistic for. I'm not so optimistic for it anymore because Frostbites aren't really doing well against Sivir. Yes, you can Brittle Steel her, but unless you had Foundry out, you generally couldn't afford to just be throwing away cards to pop spell shields, and, like, Ruin Runner is another thing that really stops... Like, Sivir and Ruin Runner is a combination that really halts the progression of control in Legends of Runeterra, because spell shield is not an easy thing to pop, and with something like Sivir Zed having the potential to just, like, one-shot you if you leave around a Sivir or a Ruin Runner, then, like, I'm not really optimistic for control decks right now. Field of Rush is really the only one where I'm still like, you can end the game fast enough that you know, can kind of compete with these things because you can ramp into it. Like, TF Swain is listed as a control deck. It's, like, kind of a control deck, but not really. Not in the sense that, like, Field of Rush is. Again, this archetype conversation is one that's really not worth having, so I kind of just have left some of these alone, but don't put too much stake in what I put here, because, like, you know, Azir Aurelia is like this aggro combo thing. Sivir Zed is like almost a mid-range aggro combo thing, and like I don't want to throw multiple words into this box. That's why it's usually really reductive when I put words here. But anyway, moving on. Like, Yetis are still fine. They're fun. I don't think they're the most competitive thing in the world. Aesol Demacia really got taken down a peg. We haven't seen this too much. I'm really hoping that with the new dragon cards from Shadow Isle, like, we can move away from Aesol Demacia and maybe go into some kind of cool Viego Shadow Isle dragon thing that we were kind of looking forward to when all those cards got spoiled, but I haven't seen anything like that performing well. Overwhelm is down in Tier 3 because because 1, Thralls is better, because 2, you really don't want to put Sivir in the deck because there are better Sivir decks like Reputation and Sivir Zed, so Overwhelm is probably going to take a bit of a hiatus this weekend. Burblefish Mind Meld, still a fine deck. Pirate Aggro, really not optimistic for the 12 1-drop aggro anymore. Pirate Aggro was cool. It came out, it had its day. Make It Rain and Double Up was cool. But now with Twin Disciplines running everywhere, I really don't think you're getting off those double ups in the way that you were on the opening week, and again, just really not optimistic for Pirate Aggro. Granted, like, the thing about Sivir Zed and Azir Aurelia as well, and apparently just every Ionia Shurima deck, is that their weakness is that you can out aggro them. Kind of like Burblefish Mind Meld when it was the big deck of the format, is like, you can still out aggro it, and that is where, like, things like Pirates and Spiders are still going to have a chance, and that's why, like, these are still on the tier list again, because they can beat out some of the better decks in the format. Like, maybe you go triple aggro and you try to beat out Sivir Zed. Will it work for you? Maybe. If you run into a non-Sivir deck, are you going to be in a bit of trouble? Yeah, maybe, because Lee Sin is really, like, all in on this eye, and with Twin Disciplines has really good tools to protect the eye, it can be difficult for aggro to push through. Frostbite midrange getting taken down a peg because, again, I don't think it's pairing well into the Sivir Zed. I've really struggled with Frostbite into even things like Reputation, where you would think that because they play Whirling Death and Bloody Business, I'd have a better shot because of my Frostbite effects, but it's so easy for them to get Reputation off and really start to flood you out with Whispered Words, and then once the Sivir levels, you're in a really rough spot. Like, Reckoning is still cool, but ultimately I don't know that Frostbite midrange is a better LeBlanc deck than Reputation, and that's part of the reason that I got moved down a peg, right? Is, you know, you don't want to have multiple champion decks in the same tier because one of them has to be better than the other, and right now I do think that Reputation is better than Frostbite midrange. And if you want to play a different, Ionia Shurima deck, you want to play Akshan Lee Sin, you want to play Eggs, then yeah, maybe Reputation becomes your Sivir deck, and then Frostbite midrange gets to sneak in there. That doesn't really sound like a great lineup, but hey, you do you. And then to round it all out, we have Deep. Deep's been making a bit of a comeback, but I'm not optimistic about it. I've been hearing some rumblings that Deep is, like, really good right now, but I haven't seen it too much for myself. But I know that, obviously, Random had his win with Karma Ezreal and Deep in the Squeebee Tournament XGG Tour from last weekend, but Random's built different on Deep. That's the Random buff. I don't know if he's going to be able to repeat that kind of success And I think that with Sivir really gaining a lot more prominence since then, with the Akshan combos and things coming out, maybe there's even a Viego deck that's going to premiere this weekend. You know, I wouldn't mind, like, I wouldn't hate the idea of Deep being in Tier 2. I could certainly, like, see someone just copy-pasting the tier list and putting Deep in Tier 2, and I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. I just don't feel like it's really there right now, but, yeah. So that is going to do it for us this week. Thank you so much for watching. If we want to talk about standard lineups, I think that, like, Sivir, Zed, Lee Sin, and then either Thralls, Draven Ezreal, or TF Swain. Like, Lee Sin's got to be in there, Sivir's got to be in there, and then you just pick one of the other 3 Tier 1 decks, be it Thralls, be it Draven Ezreal, be it TF Swain, and, like, that's probably what your standard lineup is going to look like. So you need to figure out, am I exploiting the Sivir? Am I exploiting the Lee Sin? You know, I wouldn't really recommend trying to exploit one of the other decks. But if you are, like, bringing triple aggro, then, like, Sivir and Thralls are both weaknesses within the lineup that you can seek to exploit. So, triple aggro, in a pretty good position right now. Not a great position, maybe not even a tournament-winning position, but, like, you know, if it happens, it happens. But anyway, that is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Boulevard, and as always, good luck in your tournaments.